Check out the panel discussion of combat robotics hosted by Christine at this year's PopCon.
Well, it is 12:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and if anybody happens to join us, great. This is actually a really exciting panel because I have a couple of BattleBots builders with me, so that's super exciting. It's the first time that we've had the opportunity to do this. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself. My name is Christine. I host and produce Outside of the Box podcast and have been doing that for a little bit over 3 years now, and have had the absolute pleasure of getting to know so many of the builders, both within BattleBots and just the overall combat robotics world, and get to know a little bit more about the design process, the build process, kind of how all of this stuff works. These two could certainly talk at length a little bit more about that stuff, which we will get into, but let me go ahead and introduce my panel guests. So first of all, I have Brian Boxell here, and he is part of Team Fireball, as well as Too Hot to Handle for those that follow NHRL, so pretty exciting. And I also have Ellie Clark here from Team Bloodsport, and also has some smaller bots of her own, as we were just speaking, all Taylor Swift themed, which I love and think is very cool. So super excited to get started. So I think how I'll start this off is just go and have each of you talk a little bit more about your background, how you got into combat, like how that's progressed to being at the level that you're at today. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been doing combat robotics since 2020. It started out as my COVID hobby. I've been doing robotics in various forms since late middle school, early high school, when I got into Vex robotics, and then I deeply fell in love with that, went to college to study robotics, found NHRL, which is a really big league for 3-pound, 12-pound, 30-pound robots out of Norwalk, Connecticut. Started going to that and was fortunate to watch it grow, be part of what I feel is one of the fastest growing sports in our country right now. Yeah.
All right, Ellie?
So again, my name is Ellie. I got into robotics starting out in the 3rd grade. I got started in Lego robots. Always been fascinated by Legos. My parents are like, oh, let's put her in Lego robots. They did not know what they were signing themselves up for the rest of their life. And so I did Lego robots. I've done Vex robotics for 12 years. And then I also did FIRST robotics in high school. I traveled around the world internationally during high school, competing at different robotics tournaments. Got to college, did Vex U, which is Vex's university competition, and then kind of stumbled upon combat robots one day. And now I have 2 3-pound robots, Lavender Haze and Reputation, and then I have a 30-pound robot called Karma as well.
Awesome. Well, one thing that I really want to talk about, because I think most, like the casual fan that knows of combat robotics probably knows BattleBots more than anything else. For both of you, what have you found to be the biggest differences in running a BattleBot versus running one of these guys?
Running a BattleBot is technically a very similar challenge. It's all the same CAD skills, all the same electronic skills, all the same design, but it's so much more of a team challenge, so much more logistics involved in it. Everything at that scale takes so much longer to do, is so much literally bigger and heavier, more expensive. The biggest challenge to overcome with a BattleBot instead of the 3-pounders is putting together a team of highly capable people that you can trust, rely on to fix a robot in a 3-hour turnaround time, no matter how destroyed your robot is when it comes out of a fight.
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of what Brian just said, but I think in terms of like a 3-pound robot or a 30-pound robot that you do by yourself as an individual versus BattleBots where you have a team, somewhere between, I don't know, 5 and 20, you have people that can become more specialized in things on a BattleBots team. So we might have a person that works solely on the weapon and the weapon assembly, and we might have someone that does drive assembly, electronics. But in a 3-pound class, you kind of have to do everything yourself. Like, you become the jack of all trades then. So I think that that's the biggest difference between 3-pound and a team robot, whether it be a 30-pound or a 250-pound.
I think one thing that I really want to talk about, because it's probably the biggest question that I tend to get from people outside of the sport, is the desire to build something and put typically hundreds of dollars into it and know that there is a very good chance that parts or all of it are going to be destroyed. What kind of drives you to still want to do that when you're creating something amazing and you're probably going to have to rebuild it again later on?
It's the fact that you know that you're going to have to do it again, all over again. It's the process of building these is by far the most rewarding, most fun part of what we do. And every time you bring a robot to a competition and it gets completely destroyed, it just means you get to iterate on it. And you learn from your mistakes, you see what you did wrong, and you let those ideas sit in your head, fester, grow, and then you just incrementally get better and better every single time that you do it.
Yeah, so I would say like throughout like educational robotics competitions, that is not BattleBots, it's more of an offensive game. I always felt like when I was competing in those, it's either you won or you lost. And you would be like, yes, I won, and then if you lost, you'd be like, well, I lost. And there's a couple things you can change here and there, but generally you have the same robot throughout the year. In combat robots, what I really like about it is if I win, I'm like, yes, I won, and if I lost, I'm like, yes, I get to rebuild a robot. Like, either way, like, I get the adrenaline rush of that feeling of winning, either in the aspect of actually winning the match or winning in the aspect of I get to redesign and build a robot yet again. So that's how I think of it, but like I tell people all the time that look from going from those educational robotics competitions to combat robots, I'm like, you have to be okay with putting a ton of effort into something and be completely okay with putting it in a box and watching it go up in flames in 30 seconds. Like, you have to be okay with that. But the rewarding part of it is you do get to rebuild and redesign it. So like, you can put new ideas into it, and I don't know, I personally just like building robots, so that's the fun part to me.
Definitely understandable. Now, kind of on that note, one thing that, for me personally, that I've always loved about combat robotics is the variety of robots that you see. There are people who build robots that they intend to build them to win, and there's other people who build robots that are just fun. I tend to lean towards the blend between the two, where there's a fun robot that also happens to be pretty good and wins. But talk about that difference and the motivation or desire to go one way or another, because I know, like, for you, Brian, in particular, most of your robots have done really well. I mean, Eruption is certainly one of the hardest hitting robots at NHRL, but you've also been a part of the Power of Friendship, which is delightful. And in fact, I ran into a couple of big fans of the Power of Friendship just out here on the floor today.
It's two totally different kinds of fun. I'm a very competitive person. I love succeeding and I hate losing. And for me, that's one of the big reasons why I build Eruption and why I continue to put so much effort into making sure that it's the best that it can possibly be. But it's a totally different type of fun from going out with a robot that you honestly have no idea if you're gonna win a fight, but standing there with your best friends in a crowd cheering you on just hoping that something goofy or something amazing happens is a very rewarding experience in a very different way. And I mean, Power of Friendship, we didn't expect it to get the following that it did, but that robot has like 50 million views now. It's crazy.
Yeah, understandable, because it's something unique and different, and I think the combat robotics community in general, the fans of it, certainly appreciate innovation. I mean, at least the robots that I know of, Ellie, I'd say your robots are fairly a little bit more standard of the robots that you would see, but what are your thoughts on like the level of creativity that people get into?
Yeah, so I really like combat robotics in general for the creativity aspect of it and the aesthetic aspect of it, because I feel like there's a large part of combat robotics that is the aesthetics, it is the design of the robot itself, because you have so many different robots that you can pick from. You can go into completely separate categories in like horizontal spinners, vertical spinners, flamethrowers, and you can kind of go down those avenues, and there's always more chances to innovate more within those ones. And then on top of it is cool looking robots in general. I mean, we can make robots that compete really well, but like we all want them to look really well too. So I like the design aspect of it in the aesthetic design, colors, like color schemes, themes between robots, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think all of it collectively is some pretty cool stuff. I think one thing that I want to talk about for sure is the process of getting into the sport, and like what are the most important things that you would say would be good for somebody to know that has never built a robot before, you know, going into it. I can say, you know, for myself, as somebody who has built a little bit and definitely struggled and had some challenges, that in hindsight, I definitely wish that I would have gone with a simple lifter robot to begin with, instead of trying to make a custom try-hard robot right out of the gate. I'm also a competitive person like you, Brian, so the urge to resist that was very, very strong. But yeah, both talk about like your advice and stuff for people who are trying to get into it.
I feel like my advice to someone that's starting out would be to, one, join the community of people, because I feel like specifically combat robots, the community in general is very willing to help you out in basically anything. You can go up to any builder in the pit and you can ask them about the robot, and they will most likely explain every single detail about the robot. And if you need any help, just going around and asking builders, like, hey, have you ever seen this happen before or anything? But the other thing I would say is it is okay to fail your first time. Like, you're building a robot for the first time. Like, it's okay to fail and learn from the mistakes and iterate and try again. And then, yeah, I would say, like, if you've had no experience in robots in general, the YouTube channels are really great great way to start out. I remember when I first started in combat, I was pretty intimidated. Even coming from different robotics platforms, coming into combat, you see all these robots and you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill me. I'm like, no. And I remember like setting my robot in there for the first time ever, going up against Jameson Go, which is a like renowned, like amazing builder. And it was my first ever 3-pound competition, and I put my robot in there and I was like, oh, this is gonna go great. My robot did not make it to the corner at the beginning of the match. They had to push my robot into the corner. So, like, I mean, you learn these lessons along the way and you go with it, and like, shout out to Jameson, because he was so great in the aspect of after the match he came over and he explained to me, and he, like, what I could do better, because I was like, on my robot, what can I do? Like, I don't. And even Brian, he's helped me up so much with my 3-pound robots in general. So I would say just reach out to the community in general, because they're very willing to talk about their own robots, because they're also very proud of them.
What we do is hard. There is no guide, there's nobody to tell you exactly what the best way to do it is, and we are all learning as we go. Every builder started out at some point. We all remember at least a fight where our robot did not go how it went, and everyone is so approachable for help. My first robot eruption, Started out life 0-5. I went to 3 events and did not get a single win in my first 3 events. I've now been to 45 events or so, and I have a 90% win rate now. It has taken 5 years to get to that point, but everyone in the community that I've talked to, learned from, has been so helpful. Everyone, even though we go to the cage to destroy each other and we're not friends for those 3 minutes, we're best friends outside of the box. Yeah, we're starting to get to a point with, especially 3-pound combat, where there are guides and tutorial videos to help you through kind of the beginner challenges that people face. And it's amazing that these resources are coming out. There are companies now dedicated to making this sport as accessible as possible. And because of that, we're gonna keep growing and growing and growing, and it's just gonna get easier for people to get into. And we're starting to lower the barrier to entry so low that really anyone can do it. It doesn't matter if you or your parent is an engineer, or you have access to CAD or whatever it might be. There are resources out there to help you now, and it's super, super valuable.
Yeah, I think the resources are really important and do make it a little bit less intimidating. And I think the important thing is also to see all the different, leagues out there, especially the small robots, because to talk about like that piece of it is that like setting yourself a goal of I'm going to build a 250-pound heavyweight BattleBot. I don't think that should typically be the goal out of the gate. I think there's a couple people that have done that right out of the gate, but it's not the common path for most people. The common path is build an antweight, build a beetle, build a fairy, something of that nature, just to kind of try and dip your toes into it. There's been a lot of evolution in the sport. One thing that I'm actually curious to hear from both of you, because I don't think I've ever asked either of you this question, is even though we don't want people to say aspire to build a BattleBot out of the gate, but for either of you, were there any BattleBots that you saw growing up, or as you got into the sport, that you were like, that's cool, that's the kind of robot that I would love to make someday?
Absolutely. When the BattleBot reboot came back to ABC, I was 11, and it was my absolute favorite show. I look forward to Thursday nights at 8 o'clock every single week to see Ice Wave, to see Tombstone, to see Bronco. Those were the robots that made my week. And watching that on TV set a goal for myself, even when I was 12 or 13, of that's what I want to do. And that's how I got into robotics. That's why I'm an engineer today. But yeah, I think a specific robot was Ice Wave. Ice Wave was really cool, and a huge inspiration to Bloodsport, which was very cool to work on.
I would say Witch Doctor as a robot, but specifically the builder, Andrea. I've looked up to her as a role model ever since I was little, and when I was 11 watching BattleBots on TV in the reboot. And having a strong female presence as a captain on BattleBots and being able to look up and be like, oh my gosh, she's doing great. And Witch Doctor in general is just an amazing robot, and just Andrea in general just being an amazing role model she is. I actually had the chance to meet her at filming, and it was like meeting my idol for the first time, and I was fangirling for sure. But even since her and I have talked, and she's just an amazing person, so I would say I look up to her specifically, and Witch Doctor as a robot.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a little bit older than both of you, so I know for me it was watching the original series and watching Lisa Winter back when she was a builder and competitor and everything else like that with Tentamushi. And I think that's why I have such a healthy appreciation for the fun side of robotics plus the competitive side of robotics, because I went from Tentamushi as my favorite robot to Minotaur as my favorite robot, two very different robots. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things in the sport, is just the variety, and that you can gravitate towards vastly different designs. Where do you see the sport going from here? Because, like you said, Brian, it's one of the, the rising sports, and I think all of us agree on that. There's so much possibility to make this way bigger than it is, to see this, back on TV, but not necessarily like at a BattleBots level, but even the smaller robots level, because those fights are extremely entertaining. So where do you both see it going?
I see a future where 2 years from now, we have events that are renting out convention centers like this explicitly for combat. We're very close to that point already. That is a near-term goal for sure. And then we're gonna grow from there. We're going to start to fill those convention centers. Right now, robot combat is maybe a household name. It's 50-50 on whether or not people have heard of it before, but in 5 years, most people in America will know what it is. I think part of what's going to drive that is growth in education. I think we're going to see a lot more school teams start popping up. Right now there's a whole bunch of college programs across the country, but we're gonna start to see high school programs adopt this as more 3-pound cages pop up for fighting across the country, and there are more local events to go to. There's going to be more demand. Right now, we're very limited by the number of competitions that there are and people's proximity to their nearest events and how and like complications involved with travel to get to compete as much as you want to. But the more events we have, the more accessible it's going to be, the more we can start reaching out to younger generations that can grow with it exactly like we all did. And it's just going to grow and grow and grow from here on.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the same things, specifically looking into the educational part of it. I know that a lot of teams are putting together kits to send out, like Witch Doctor has a kit made for younger kids to learn to get into combat in a safe and effective manner to inspire them to go into STEM in general. Because research has shown if you capture them in the 1st to 3rd grade level and you capture them within STEM, then they will most likely go on to achieve a career within STEM. So if we can get the 1st through 3rd graders interested then, and then put them into educational robotics programs that can be from combat and other robotics competitions as well. And then as they grow up, they will morph into combat robots, because combat robots is one of the only robotics competitions that spans all age ranges. So you can go to a competition, you can compete against a 5-year-old, and you can compete against someone that's done the sport for 50 years. And you can have back-to-back matches too. Against the two, which is really cool. And then as well as, the proximity to events is, I feel like for me, the hardest thing. I didn't grow up on the East Coast where a lot of the events happen, so traveling with your robots is very hard. Getting them through TSA, understanding all that. Shipping 250-pound robots is not easy either. So like bringing those events, specifically to states that don't normally have them, you're going to get the interest very fast, because it's around. People ask me all the time about my robots, and they're like, oh, I want to make a robot. I'm like, get a 3D printer, let's go. Like, but there needs to be events accessible to them within, I would say, like 5 hours of driving is the max I would do, but that's personal preference. But yeah, so I see in the next 5 to 10 years for combat robots is that you're going to see a really big boom in the educational section of combat robots, as well as a larger younger generation coming up as we go through that.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to dive a little bit more into the accessibility and also a little bit more of the technical aspect too, in a way, because you mentioned 3D printing, and I think the advent of more and more people having 3D printers has made it more accessible for people to make a robot, because there are plastic and weight classes, and so that is something that people can do. As you can see with a lot of these guys up here, there are some that are made out of more plastic than others, but plastic still has applications in a beetle weight robot, or even some of the higher weight classes, maybe not as much. So if you could both talk about like that piece of it, the accessibility of 3D printing, and also how viable is it to use 3D printed parts depending on the weight class that you're competing in?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that. I'm a huge 3D printing geek, so I will try not to geek out. I feel like 3D printing in general has become a lot more accessible throughout, even when I was younger to now. I used to run a 3D printing lab in high school. I ran the machine shop at Michigan State where I went to college. And even now, like getting people into 3D printing, most of my coworkers probably didn't have 3D printers before they met me. I have now convinced them that they all need 3D printers in their life. 3D printing in combat specifically is really easy to get into plastic ant weights because really all you need is a 3D printer and you need some motors that you can get off Amazon, AliExpress. Like, you can get them for very cheap, so the barrier of entry is very low. And then in terms of like 3D printers, like there are $99 3D printers right now you can get at the Micro Center down the street. The Creality MFB3 is a really great beginner 3D printer that you can get that is very accessible to a lot of people because it's only $99. Like and so like once you're able to get a 3D printer and you can learn how to CAD, because in order to 3D print you need a CAD. And then once you learn how to CAD, you learn how to put together your 3D printer. You're doing engineering, going through the engineering mindset the whole time of, I want to make this thing, I need a 3D printer, get 3D printer, learn how to CAD model, potentially build 3D printer, which that's a whole nother subject, and then 3D print. And it's very rewarding in that aspect because you saw a part that you designed in your hand, and you're like, oh my gosh, I made this part. And then with combat robots, you, especially in like the 3-pound ant weight, most of the parts are 3D printed, so like you can build basically any single robot that you would want, and the parts are very accessible because you can CAD them yourself and print them in-house.
I think for a lot of people, 3D printing still feels like a futuristic technology that feels out of reach, especially depending on you know, your region, where you come from. But in the year 2025, printing has come so far that we're at a point where it just works. Like, it is not where it was in 2015. You can buy a $100 and $150 printer, press go, and it just works like a 2D printer that you might find at your library. And actually, a lot of local libraries now will have maker spaces in them with 3D printers. So if you don't have one, check out, maybe your local library does. And if you don't have access to CAD, if you don't have CAD skills right now, there are models you can download for these robots online to just get going on your first one, print it out, have fun with it. Even if it's not a robot that you want to stick with because you want to design your own, it's still a great starting point to learn how to print, how to assemble, how to do the electronics, and sort of work your way up to it in baby steps. But yeah, 3D printing has come around so far, even in the last 3 to 4 years, really, since like the advent of the Bamboo Lab line of printers. They totally changed the game with like the Bamboo A1 Mini. It's a $220 printer that just works, and has really turned around accessibility of 3D printing. And to your point, or your question of how viable is this in combat, we've got all of these robots right in front of us right now that are some combination of 3D printing and then a carbon fiber top and bottom plate. Like this guy, for instance, and just to be clear, this is not my robot. This is an entirely 3D printed frame. Everything colorful here is 3D printed. And then it's got 2 carbon fiber top and bottom plates, which you can outsource from the internet for $5-10 a piece. And this material that we print in called TPU, it's like a printable rubber. It's so squishy, it's so bendy, and super durable. For the 1 and 3 pound classes, TPU works fantastic. It starts to not be strong enough once you get beyond, I think 30 pound and up is the point where TPU doesn't really cut it so much as your aluminum and steel that might be a little bit more expensive and out of reach for some, but TPU and 3D printing can take you a really, really long ways in this sport.
I would agree. I certainly have used TPU armor on my robots, and it holds up pretty well, way better than you would expect. And the good news is that if it gets destroyed, it's pretty easy to print another one and replace it. So if you don't want to have to go through the hundreds of dollars to replace parts on your robot, 3D printed materials work pretty well. One thing I do want to talk about as well, because we are at an event, is because you've talked a little bit about like distance between events and stuff like that, is just getting more events and what the process is to run an event. Because Brian, you actually have been part of organizing an event with your dad, and talk about like coming up with the first time that you do an event and like all of the steps that you have to go through to make sure that it goes well and that people show up for it.
Yeah, so I think at this point all of us up here have run events in some capacity. I ran the first combat robot event at an RC hobby shop called RC Excitement in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, with my dad last year, and he ran another one a few months ago this year, and they've both been great successes. We had 40 bots each and maybe 200 or so spectators coming throughout the day. Running an event is something that we had talked about since I was in high school doing Vex robotics stuff, and one day we were on the phone and just said, okay, it's time, we're gonna pull the trigger on this. We had this sort of stars align with the connections that we had to this hobby shop that already had pit tables, electricity, things like that set up for us to help ease us into setting up an event. And at that point, I've been to 40 some odd events in my combat career so far, and he's been to 50 something events in his combat career so far. So we've seen our fair share of what works and what doesn't work, and we had our ideas for how we can tackle these problems. And then when we got around to doing it, we started reaching out to people from NHRL, people from GSCRL, the New Jersey League, people from TRC, the Texas League, asking what are suggestions that you have for running our first event? What are pitfalls that we need to avoid? And everyone was super willing to help. People were willing to come volunteer. People were willing to donate. People were willing to give us the cages that we fight in. If running an event is something that that you're maybe interested in, totally look into it. You're gonna find that because of the resources that are available to you, it's easier than you might think to get into, and super rewarding.
Yeah, Ellie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to basically echo everything he just said. But basically, I feel like at first it's very intimidating to think about starting to host your own event, and then you start to realize, like the questions you have in your head are like, oh, where am I going to get a cage? How am I going to get a place to hold this, pit tables, all that. But as soon as you start reaching out, you find that people are very willing to help you out. I actually made 3-pound cages for the event, but just off to the side, I didn't borrow someone else's, but the instructions for the 3-pound cages are out there too. It's very easy to go find the instructions, go get the material, and build the cages too. And finding volunteers, anyone, if you tell someone that you're going to hold an event for fighting killer robots, people usually take interest in that. And they're like, oh, that's pretty cool, I'll come volunteer, come watch some robots destroy each other. So in terms of that, I think it's just a lot more intimidating at the start, but as soon as you get going in that direction and you reach out, it's very easy to get connected with people that can help.
Yeah, and I can attest to that, you know, even for this event. We've had several people travel from a distance to either compete, to help out, just to be here. And so once you get into the community, you know, like, people are willing to show up for you and support you and things like that. I think that's one of the wonderful things. Now, I'll do as I kind of have in the past with these panels. I can open it up if anybody has any specific questions that they would like to ask our panelists. Yes.
So, Mr. Brian, I kind of fall into the category of one of the people you were talking about earlier who has a 3D printer. You know, I printed a couple of robots, but now I'm trying to get into kind of the CAD aspect of it. Do you have any resources or things to help me progress with that? Because I'm at the beginner level.
Yeah, definitely. I guess beginner level. The two main CAD softwares I'd recommend are Onshape and Fusion. They both have free versions of the software available and tutorial series to go with it. But as much as you can follow along with the tutorial, nothing is going to teach you better than just hopping into it and having at it. Say, I'm going to design a simple cube, or a tunnel, or a chair, whatever it might be, a simple design, and just work your way through the process, and you'll find 1 hour in, you'll start to understand, okay, this tool does that, that tool does that. 2 hours in, you'll start to understand the concepts of, if I make a cylinder here and a cube there, then I can make a stoplight. And you piece it together, and then you can make more complicated mechanisms like a wheel or the general shape of a weapon for one of these robots. And you'll get better and better over time and build your skills as an engineer and designer.
Thank you.
I'll add on to that real quick. Sorry. My dad is not an engineer at all. And he's recently taken into wanting to learn how to design things and stuff. So I was recently actually teaching him CAD over FaceTime this past weekend. And it's very amazing to watch people pick it up so fast, because I think if you just get going, you will end up learning as you go. He sent me models this morning that he's CAD'd. Like, he has not stopped. And he's sent me files and stuff to 3D print. He doesn't know this yet, but like, I did buy him a printer this morning, and it's gonna show up at his house. Yeah, but I'll make it home before he knows that. But I would say, like, it's really easy once you get going, and there's tons of video tutorials out there, and then as well as if you reach out to anyone, they'll be more than willing to hop onto a Discord call or a FaceTime, and I had to explain to him at the very beginning how to draw a line, and now he is creating complex shapes and chassis of robots. So I feel like soon my dad will join this sport.
And just to reiterate, the stuff that we do is hard. The ceiling for how high you can take these designs is so high. And there are people that have been doing this their whole life and are professional engineers that are continually raising the bar for what you would expect a top-tier robot to look like. But that doesn't mean that a spinner on a square chassis that is the bounds of your current capabilities as a beginner isn't going to hold up well. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful, complicated, complex thing to get the job done and for you to have fun with it.
Any other questions?
How proud are you of your dad?
I am so proud of what he has pulled off with his robots. I mean, the way that we got into combat, and I've told this story a couple of times, was I went to the first NHRL competition by myself, and then I went back and I said, Dad, you got to check this out. You're gonna love it. And then we drove home from that event, and he said, Brian, I want a robot, and his Christmas gift that year was a robot. He took that, and we worked together on that for the first 6 months, figuring it out, because no new robot is ever any good off the start. But eventually we came up with version 2, and then that was fully pushed off to him, and the robot hasn't visually changed much since then, but he's put in so much work to get it to get Caldera to where it is now, and I couldn't be prouder. He was an absolute beginner when we started. He didn't know how to do CAD. He didn't know how to 3D print, but just by working together and realizing how much he loved this sport, he put in so much to get to where it is now.
Good question. Any other questions? I do have a question actually myself, because it's something that I've always wondered, and I don't think I've ever gotten a full explanation, is when speaking about CAD, how do you determine ahead of time when you're designing a robot and making a robot without having actual tangible parts, that you are making sure that it is within the weight limit of the weight class that you're designing for?
So I guess, yeah, I'll go first, but I've been in the sport of combat for about 2 years now, and I'll still say that I still struggle with that sometimes. I think it's a struggle that we all run into because we want to make our robot as heavy as possible, but be within the limits. So what I do is, on CAD, you can assign materials to things, and you can set material properties. So that can give you a general basis of what your robot's going to weigh, but it always fluctuates from there. So I always give myself enough tolerance for that. I also have an Excel sheet that I will weigh out in grams each part, and I will hope that it is the same at the end. It is always a guessing game though, so I always give myself some tolerance, and you'll make adjustments if it's too heavy, or if you realize, oh, my robot is a lot lighter than I thought, and then you're like, oh, I can actually make this piece thicker, I can increase this, I can do this to this robot to make it better. So I tend to side on the lighter side and make some walls thicker, make the guards more beefy, like it just depends. But usually that's the process I go through. I go on CAD, assign materials, and then I'll make an Excel sheet based on that, and like batteries and everything, I will weigh them. Bolts, I have a general sense now on how the bolts I use, how much grams is one bolt, and I usually just stay with that throughout all my robots, so it's really easy to go from there.
I think my answer to this is to fail and then try again when you realize that you failed. It is totally possible to predict the weight that the robot is going to end up at, but it's a lot of work to do when you get down to it. I mean, estimating the weight of 3D prints is really hard. What the slicer software tells you isn't always 100% accurate. How do you know what the length of the wire, or the weight of the wires you're going to use are if you don't even know how long your wires are yet? You just sort of make a bunch of estimates and best guesses based on previous experiences, based on what other people have told you, and you put that into a spreadsheet and give yourself, I don't know if it's like 10% or so, a little bit of wiggle room, and then you'll be close enough. I think for me, at this point, my robots are more of an iterative thing. So I know what it weighs now, and when I go to make the next iteration, I track what is changing, what is going away, and what I'm adding. So instead of like having one bill of materials that has the weight of everything, I just compare what is disappearing to what I'm adding and use that as an estimate for where I'm going to end up.
Cool. Well, I have one last question, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask for both of you. If you could design any robot, no monetary limit, sky's the limit, you can do whatever you want, what do you think that looks like, and in what weight class?
I wish BattleBots had less restrictions on flamethrowers. I want to build the biggest flamethrower that you can possibly do in a 250-pound robot. and it would be so dangerous. And it violates so many laws, but it would be awesome.
I would say that I would probably produce a small army of like compete at the 250-pound weight class, but have like a small army of like a bunch of 30-pound robots. I just think that would be really cool to just like see like, I don't know, 50 of them like swarm, like a duck swarm, like, you know, like I don't know. I think it would be really cool, like create them out of titanium or something. Like, we'll put some flamethrowers on them too. I mean, who doesn't like a flamethrower? But just have like a whole army of them. I think that would look pretty cool.
I appreciate that you both are going for the flamethrowers. I am a big fan of that myself, and I wish that more leagues had the capability to run those, because I would definitely make one if that were the case. So, well, I appreciate folks coming out to hear this. I think Brian and Ellie, wonderful answers, and exciting to have you coming up here and talking about robots. Anybody that's here that wants to take a look at any of the robots up here real quick, we can certainly do that. But thank you for joining the panel.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.